You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. In 2002, Greg Constantine left a career in the music industry so he can focus his energies on projects of greater importance to him. In 2005, he moved to Asia in order to begin a long-term project titled Nowhere People, a photographic record that documents the struggles and plight of stateless communities and individuals. For reasons often having to do with politics, religion, and feuds dating back generations, the people Greg photographs are stateless. They live Kafkaesque existences, often unable to secure work, medical aid, housing, and the most basic of human dignities. Greg Constantine's work has appeared in the New York Times, the International Herald Tribune, Newsweek, the New Republic, the Atlantic, the Wall Street Journal, and other publications. I would read off a list of the number of awards that Greg has won, but with all due respect, we try to keep the running time of our shows down to about an hour. Trust me, the list is both lengthy and impressive. Greg Constantine, welcome very much to our show.
Really pleased to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
It's great. I want to start off with a statement. We're going to cover a lot of things, and I started going over your work when we started preparing the show, and here's what struck me, okay? Your pictures fluster me. You're photographing the ugly underbelly of human nature. The images you capture are devastating. My problem is that the compositions of your photographs, the expressions on people's faces, what you allow me to see and what you don't allow me to see, hijacks my eyes and hijacks my senses. What I witness in your photographs is horrifying, yet I find it hard to separate the visual aesthetics of your photographs from the frightening realities of what I'm viewing. Your pictures are often too beautiful for me and too perfect, and that's a weird thing to say about what you are photographing.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate your insightfulness and your own opinion and everything. I mean, I think that, I work primarily on long-term projects that are all about human rights abuse and inequality and social injustices and everything. And, we all walk into these kind of stories trying to document them the way that we see them, but also at the same time, we inevitably and naturally add in our own aesthetic. I think that opens up a really big debate in the photojournalism world and documentary that's not new. The use of the aesthetic when you're recording, horrific stories of trauma and human rights abuse.
Can I jump in real quick on that? Because maybe you can think of an example where in an editing process, there was a photo that aesthetically was you loved it, let's say, or it was a good photo. But it wasn't reflecting the idea that you thought was most important to the story, or vice versa. A photo that was really reflecting the idea, but it wasn't such a good photo. How do you make those decisions? What do you think through, and where do you tend to favor?
Do you ever take lousy pictures?
Oh, sure. Yeah, completely.
One after the other, your pictures are stunning. And that's what's jarring me about it.
No, I do. And, I guess the thing is, for me, there's also another component, which probably you might have recognized but didn't. But, I've shot film all the way up until last year. Everything was on film. I just went digital this year.
There's a stark black and white aesthetic.
Everything was shot. For 12 years, I shot Tri-X on a Leica and a Nikon F100. And this last year is the first year where I started doing a little bit of doing digital work.
And where'd you go with that? What, DSLR or Leica?
Leica's out of my reach in terms of just finances. But I tried to mirror my kit because I was using an M6 and an F100. And so now I'm using a D750 and just a Sony RX3, which I love.
Sure.
And I think that kind of mirrors the kit that I have. But, the fact is when you're shooting film, you have to make every single frame count as much as you can. You're carrying 50 or 75 rolls for a 1-month trip, and that's all you've got. And so you have to be very diligent in terms of how you're shooting. And so, I take a lot of crappy shots, but you try to focus on, I take a lot more crappy shots doing something on digital than I did on film. And that's just, I think, the nature of it all. And given the fact that most of the work that you see online, actually, I would say 99% of the work that you see online on any of the sites, that's all done on film. I have not posted really anything on digital.
What prompted the shift?
I think it was economics. I mean, because I pretty much exist and fuel the work that I do through grants. I mean, really, none of my work. I really rarely ever do assignment work, and that's not by choice. I mean, I think over the 12 years of working on Nowhere People, I was on assignment for a media organization only twice. Everything else was done through grants, fellowships, commissions.
NGOs?
Some commissions from NGOs, you know, but mostly through grants. And that was a strategy that I took to kind of liberate myself from the confines of having to have on deadlines to be able to
agendas
work.
Other than the one you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, agendas I think is maybe a bit of a strong word, but it was just basically I like to spend time on things. I like to work at my own pace. I like to have the freedom to be able to direct the work and channel the work in whatever medium I want, whenever I want. I mean, I think that these days, that sense of authorship over the work is just such a crucial thing for people doing documentary work.
And so how much time do you spend writing grant proposals and looking for funding in this sense?
I'd say that I probably spend up to 40% of the year looking for funding, applying for grants, networking my way in with different foundations or building up contacts that can then lead to introductions. So instead of sending out a cold call email to somebody who could be a potential funder, it's always about trying to get introduced to people. So I spend a huge part of my time and efforts just trying to do that because that's really where the financial fuel is that I kind of rely on to do the work.
This is obviously a work of passion for you. What's the seeds of this? How'd you get started here?
Well, okay, I'll tell you. Like you said, I was working in various capacities in the music because I was living in New York City. I lived in New York for most of the 90s, was working for HMV Records on various mega stores that they had, worked in a couple other companies and just felt like I needed to do something different. So I quit, cashed in my 401k, went and put on a backpack and traveled around the world for 8 months. And that whole experience, I carried my dad's old Canon AE-1 with me. I really was not too much into photography at that time, but just carried it, traveled around the world with it, fell in love with photography, actually fell in love with trying to tell stories more than anything else.
Interesting.
And as I was on that trip, go a little bit deeper in the backstory, but my dad had had a stroke, a severe stroke when I was 16 in 1986. And when I was traveling around the world, and left him permanently disabled for the rest of his life. And as I was traveling around all these different countries, whether it was Cambodia or Vietnam or Thailand or Syria or Jordan, I saw a guy that looked exactly like my dad. I knew that guy or that woman had had a stroke. And I just started thinking, I wonder what their lives are like in this far-flung country where there's medical systems that aren't as developed as ours or anything. And I ran out of money and finished my trip, and I came back here to New York. I got another job in the music business. I worked in it for about a year and a half. And when the contract came up, they were like, would you want to work here full-time? I'm like, no, I want to get back on the road. So I saved up all my money that year, and I went back out, and I traveled from Beijing to Istanbul overland for 8 months. And during that trip, I said, there's got to be more of a thread, a purpose behind this trip than just travel for the travel's sake. So I decided to try to meet with people who had strokes in almost every country that I would travel through. So I could learn a little bit about their lives, write stories about it, take pictures, and then donate those stories to a nonprofit stroke organization in my hometown of Indianapolis that had just started to do stuff online. So on that particular trip, I started meeting with people who had strokes in Thailand or in Burma or in Kyrgyzstan.
How do you
or
approach
Uzbekistan.
people about that?
To be honest with you, it was really funny because on that first trip, I fell in love with photography and storytelling, and on that second trip, it was like I fell in love with the process of journalism because really I had to find the subjects, I had to find the translator, I had to do all those things that journalists do. So I'd be in a guest house, stay in some crappy guest house somewhere, and I'd ask the owner, do you know anybody who's had a stroke? And they'd say, what's a stroke? And then you describe it to them. They're like, oh yeah, I know this guy who lives down the street from me that had one. Can you introduce me to him? Well, sure. Do you know anybody who speaks Russian in Uzbekistan? Well, sure, I can help you out with that. And one thing led to another, and I just absolutely fell in love with the process.
It was a whole process.
It was a process that took years, but it was a course that, I felt like was pushing me in one direction. And
At what point did you say, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. This is what I'm going to be working on? When did you hit the first project where you said, this is it?
I think it was when my girlfriend at the time, fiance now, we moved to Japan together. And she was working in a job. I was teaching English part-time, and the rest of the time I was just walking the streets of Tokyo, just learning the craft, walking around with my Nikon F80, at the time, just shooting whatever I thought was interesting. And that's when I was just like, this is something I really want to give a shot. So I started working on my first stories. And I remember I worked on the story about North Korean refugees seeking asylum in Southeast Asia. This was when we were living in Tokyo. And that process and the people that I were meeting and just feeling like you're a part of something bigger than yourself. And, then you go through the whole challenge of trying to get it published.
Who picked up on it first?
The BBC Online ran like a 300-word story that I wrote and 2 pictures.
On the North Korean subject?
On the North Korean subject.
Okay.
And that was it.
Let me ask, this was a question I was hoping maybe to get one of those wrap-up questions, but you brought up journalism. You consider yourself a documentarian more, no? Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
But you said that, with Strokes, you kind of learned the journalistic process.
Yeah.
When did you realize that journalism wasn't quite what you were up to, and then you didn't really want to pursue this sense of an assignment and a publication, and then publishing these stories, and you needed to work the longer form and kind of change the mentality that goes with that?
I think, let's put it this way. I don't think that I've shied away from that journalistic fundamentals, because I think when you're working as a documentarian, you still have that.
The line's blurred, there's no doubt.
Yeah, completely.
I'm just curious
but I think that, I think there came a time where, a few years into it, where you start measuring your success based on what you think other people's expectations are for you. You end up thinking that you've got to fit in with the machine and the way that it's going in the traditional way. And always the traditional way is you're a photographer, you go out and you take pictures, and they get published through a traditional outlet, newspaper, magazine, online, whatever it is. And to be honest with you, I remember that I came to New York, I had portfolio pictures, and I was like so nervous, thinking, man, I just got to put myself out there a little bit. I was living in LA at the time. I'd worked on the story that I really felt so passionately about. I was really invested in it. And I brought in a portfolio of pictures, and I met with one of the agencies here, which I won't mention. And I walked in, this would have been 2003, 2004. And I remember, and this is right before I moved to Asia to kind of embark on Nowhere People. And I walked in, I sat down, I showed my portfolio, and they were looking through it, and they said, wow, these are really great pictures, and it's a really fantastic story. But do you have any photographs of the disabled Iraqi veterans? And it was at that moment when I knew this is not the place where I fit in. This is not what I want to be. I don't fit into this world. And so I just kind of went off and just said, I'm going to start doing what I want to do, and I'll make it work one way or another.
And was that an aha moment that gave you a positive push, or the other way?
A completely positive push. I mean, a frustrating push, because I knew that it would require a lot, more resilience and determination. But at the same time,
it's a breakthrough
it was
for
an
you.
affirmation for me, like, okay, this is, I don't want to, there's no use in me exerting my energy and trying to fit in with this particular segment of the industry. It's this other place that I want to be. This is where I belong. And so that's basically when I decided, okay, nobody would fund me for that first trip. I had some money saved up. I'm going to stretch my penny as far as I can. I'll move to Asia because that's where I can do it. And I'll just see what happens. And one thing led to another, to another, to another. And, I studied business in college. I didn't study journalism photography. But, in that kind of way, you take your photographer's hat off, and you put your entrepreneur's hat on to figure out how the hell to go about funding the work that you want to do in a meaningful way.
And then you shoot film.
And yeah, exactly. Or actually, to be honest with you, you are totally right. But then at the same time, you're like, you realize you're doing it your way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
A question I have for you, amongst others here, is that a lot of your subjects are people who have every reason to be fearful. Okay, how do you break the ice? How do you get their trust? aside from the fact that you come off as a very earnest, honest human being, but there's a lot. I mean, these people have defenses up,
Well, there's culture, there's language.
there's everything. There's so much
yeah.
going on. What tools do you draw on to break through, to make a connection with these people?
I think that talking, listening. I mean, honestly, I think I record audio, and whether I ever use the audio or not, it's that process of sitting down with somebody for an hour and talking with them, and they take you. I think this is just my own experience. People take you more seriously in that sense. They know that you're there. They know that you really want to hear their story, and then that opens up. And then also because I really do. It's time is a big thing.
Yeah.
You'll go back and visit
spent.
people. You invest the time, and when people see you coming back.
The familiarity factor.
They're like,
sure.
okay, well, this,
gives a
this
shit.
is exactly.
Yeah.
They really do, and that I think that ends up producing situations that then produce or open yourself up for images that are much more intimate and different.
So you went from the North Korean story led to the greater idea of nowhere people and
Yeah.
statelessness,
Yep.
and tell us where did it go from there, like the next steps and.
Well, so when I decided to kind of embark on the statelessness project, it was intentionally going to be about a year and a half long. I wanted to move. I knew I wanted to do in Asia. I was familiar with it. The biggest stateless groups in the world are all in Asia. That's economically, it was made sense for me. But I also knew that there was going to be this process of. All the people that I had approached before to try to fund me were just like, it's a great idea. We really believe it. We can help you out with information, but we just aren't in a position to be able to fund you. So I knew that I would have to create a body of work that I could then leverage and say, this is what I'm trying to do. You didn't get it then, but now you get it now. And so moved to Asia and started working on it. I was just so amazed, so shocked, so outraged by the situations that I was seeing with these stateless communities, that nobody was really spending any time documenting them or trying to tell their stories in a meaningful way. I recognized that as an opportunity for myself as a photographer, but it was just this curiosity and intrigue about why is nobody spending any time on this? And it automatically opened up me thinking about how this story on statelessness, on this Urdu-speaking community in Bangladesh that I would go back to 3 times, just opens up so many much bigger themes that are so relevant. And I think that's what really, for me, that's so much of what photography and documentary work is about. It's about showing people, a specific situation, but it also then opens people up to thinking about the larger thematic elements outside of that story, how it might apply to other places. That's what I really love about the work. And so one thing led to another, and, I got a year into the project, and a friend of mine introduced me to somebody at the International Herald Tribune, and I pitched them the work. And Cecilia Bohan, who was one of the photo editors, she was the photo editor in Hong Kong for IHT at that time, and then she was with the New York Times. She just left, but she loved the work, and they ran, a full-page spread of the pictures, and then they ran in the Week in Review here in the Times, and that's when I think all these people were like, okay, now we kind of see what you're trying to do.
Was that personally, what a great moment it must have been, but also how much fuel did that give you to go forward? When even one published piece like this,
it made a huge difference. Yeah, it made a huge difference because, to be honest with you, I was realistically a totally unpublished, unknown, unrecognized, which I can't really stand using that word recognized. But the fact is, nobody knew who I was, and I had been just grinding on this story. And then when somebody, an editor or a writer, believes in a project enough, it's this really weird sense of validation in a sense. Not that you're fitting into the industry, but it's like,
weird.
somebody believes in what I'm doing, and
somebody listened.
Yeah, and nobody, it's not like it resulted into assignments for the New York Times, because it didn't. But at the same time, it was like, okay, I'm heading in the right direction here.
It validates what you're doing.
And this is what I'm doing something right, and I need to keep pursuing it.
And maybe a couple of practical questions. And this, obviously, the film aspect opens up a lot of practical questions. But what was your process? Even in the sense of keeping and storing the film, getting back to a place where you can process them. Did you give yourself like, okay, I'm going to go a month of work at a location away from a major city and then come back, process, edit.
Yeah.
Is that how it worked?
That's how it worked for me. Yeah. I mean, I was living in Bangkok and, still live in Bangkok basically. And I'd go out and do my stuff. I'd come back with 75 rolls of exposed film. I'd work with a Thai guy, great Thai guy who had an amazing darkroom. He passed away years ago. And he processed my film, and then I did it. I processed my own for years ago, but then he started doing it. He did a lot of work for a lot of photographers in the region, and then scan it, edit it, do whatever I do in a darkroom. I started Nowhere People. I moved to Bangkok the end of 2005. I really dove into the project the beginning of 2006.
Okay.
And, and it was, it's extra steps in the workflow, but, it's like there's nothing, to me, there's nothing more enjoyable than taping your contact sheets or a strip of negatives onto a window in a hotel or wherever it is. And putting your loop on it and looking through it. I mean, honestly, that's sexy. I mean,
I understand.
And it's such
especially if you're in your underwear, right?
And it's such an intimate part of that process.
Sure.
That I just don't get when I'm looking at my iMac.
So we come back to one other thing. I started talking about aesthetics and the visual imagery that you produce. You don't have any formal training in photography, but what about in visuals and art and anything? Because your eye seems to be trained to compose pictures so that they say what they're meant to be saying. There's a lot of impact there. And a lot of people are journalists, and they're just taking pictures of what's happening there. And sometimes I wonder if there's actually much thought to the composition, aside from just keeping the subject in the center of the frame. Your pictures are a lot more sophisticated and go far beyond that. Do you recall studying pictures, just casually going through books and magazines or paintings? I mean, have you been visually oriented?
To be honest with you, no. I mean, I've never really.
So it's innate.
I'm not going to go that far, but I mean, I think the fact is that I've never studied art. I've never really. I mean, there are photographers that I look to for inspiration over the years and stuff, but at the same time, it's
Any
like
names?
I've never.
You want to mention anybody?
Oh, I mean, there's the
no pressure.
there's the kind of the classics of. William Klein and Gil Perez and I mean
I know Gil, he's great.
Yeah, I mean there's certain people that like influence you in certain ways, whether they're aesthetic ways or whether it's the fact that they're so intrepid in the way that they do things, or whether it's just whether they take the attitude of I'm going to do it my way and I don't care what anybody. I'm not going to try to fit into anybody's kind of box for all those different reasons. You may not like their pictures, but you respect the choices that they've made. And so in that sense, Well,
one thing, I mean, obviously there's many great journalists who can compose in a heartbeat on the fly, but, given that you're not necessarily creating something that needs to be sent out that night, you're thinking about the long term, you're thinking about the process, the story, there is a little more time, I imagine. And you're working in film, so that does slow you down for the compositional sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's something about, calisthenics that you run in your mind when you're shooting and working for long periods of time on stories over a long period of time, that aesthetic compositional element is something that helps in the creation of the longer story, I guess, if that makes any sense. Because I don't particularly feel like I've ever been the type of photographer that's working in single images. I always feel like I'm working in a narrative of images that goes on for however long, and there's always something in terms of the compositional way that you shoot that adds some new way for that one image that you're shooting to add on to the string of other images that you've created over the past year or two or three. So
you also do, I mean, as you mentioned, audio and in film, so they're kind of multi-discipline projects.
Yeah.
Is that always been the case? Is something you developed along the way?
It has been. I mean, I don't think I do as much of it as I would really like, or in an extensive way is what I would like. I mean, I feel like I'm not really as fluent in the language of video because it is a whole different language than stills, and I don't feel like I'm fluent enough in that language. I like using video for something, whether it be an installation for an exhibition or for something online or whatever. But I haven't really incorporated video too much into the larger kind of story, the way you're telling things. Audio is a whole different thing. But yeah, I mean, I think we have these amazing tools at our disposal now to take stories to a whole different level, add on different layers to them. And each one of those layers you add, in so many ways, it gives, I guess you could say, more agency to the people who are in your photographs to be able to express their stories in a different way. I mean, you're the one who in one way or another is kind of capturing the sort of collecting the information and presenting to people, but the essence, the raw elements of that story are people providing you with that material, and that's what I really love about all these different disciplines that we have and the tools that we have today.
Do you integrate yourself with the communities in the sense that you'll live with the people you're traveling and photographing with, or do you keep yourself back to your own place where you stay and then go every day in and out?
It's pretty much every day in and out, I mean, there's, I mean, that's just kind of the way that I've worked. And, a lot of the communities, you try to set yourself up in a place where you have easy access to be able to get into communities when you need to and to stay there for as long as you can, whether it's a whole entire day or just a few hours. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way it is.
Yeah. Can you pinpoint or put your finger on anything positive that's come out of all this effort that you've done? Something that's happening, say, this happened because somebody saw my pictures. What kind of results are you getting from your efforts?
Man, I mean,
I'm hoping you are.
No, I mean, I think this is one of those things to where, like, I don't want to place photography on such a high of a pedestal to think that it can really directly lead to change, because I think that is a bit.
It's a piece of it.
It's a contributing factor.
Right.
It's when you look at all these stories about, I'll stay just with statelessness. The fact is that it's a very legal intensive kind of subject matter, policy subject matter, which again, they're all different languages. And I really do believe that photography is this kind of language, and it has to be inserted into these really important discussions, just like the legal, just like the academic, all that. And so for me, that's where that's what I try to do, is to say, okay, this photography needs to be inserted into this discussion that people are having. So I'll do everything I can to do that. But to kind of go back to your question, I would say that, I can give one example of something of a project that I'm really proud of, where I do feel like it made a really positive contribution. That would have been the work on the Nubian community in Kenya. I mean, the first book. I mean, it was like a discovery for me, that whole project. It came out totally organically. Nothing was planned. It was just one thing opened up itself after another. And I knew I wanted to go to Kenya. I ended up getting the funding to go to Kenya. I went and spent a month there with this particular community. And as I was they live in the Kibera slum outside of Nairobi. I mean, that's their indigenous homeland. They've lived there for over 100 years before it was even a slum, before Kenya was even a country. Their history was so amazing. And as I was talking with families and stuff, ultimately they'd end up pulling out like dusty shoeboxes filled with old photographs that they had never shown with their neighbors who were Nubians, sometimes with their own family members. And they'd show me, and it was just like this treasure trove of a visual history of this community that the Kenyan authorities had done everything that it possibly could to either erase or deny or challenge. And that was part of the reason why they were stateless, is all about their history. Everybody challenged their history. And so one thing led to another, and I realized, okay, well, I've got my work that I'm doing here, which shows the repercussions of what's happened to a community as being denied or stripped of their citizenship. But these pictures that people are showing me show what this community had when they were recognized by British colonial authorities or before Kenya's independence. So the story was incomplete with just my work. And I realized that. And I just ended up thinking, okay, well, to be able to tell this story the right way, I need to juxtapose the old photographs with mine. Yeah. So I came back from that trip and I was just like, listen, I need to apply for a grant to see how I can get these open. I applied for a grant, got a grant from the Documentary Photography Project at the Open Society, and worked with a team of Nubian youth over a couple of months. They went out and collected all these old photographs. I think they collected like 350 old photographs. The oldest one was dated back to 1908.
Wow.
And we digitized them all, had the discs sent to me in Thailand. I kind of curated everything. And then we held an exhibition in downtown Nairobi of the old photographs and of my photographs, the then and now, what they had and what they lost. And that had a huge impact, I think, on people in Nairobi, but it was like how it affected the Nubian community and the youth was just, I'd never expected. I mean, they were just like, so this is that history our grandparents and our parents have been telling us about that we've never seen before.
It was hidden under the beds.
It was hidden underneath the beds. And they're like, we need to take up the torch that our parents have led to try to get, our rights. And we need to pick it up from here. And that led to, man, Greg, you should really try to get a book published on this because internet wasn't so big. It could be a really great resource. So I went out and applied and started trying to get the money together to publish the book. And there you go. I mean, I ended up getting the money to self-publish the book. I did it with a printer in tritone in Thailand. It was the first time they'd ever printed tritone. And it was amazing. I worked with an amazing photographer who's a huge mentor for me, Roland Naveau. He's he's had such a huge influence on me and my career. And we published the book, donated like several hundred copies to the Nubian community so they could hand it out to people in Kenya to show this is our history. Put a copy in every single library in Kenya, and I feel like that it contributed,
A music industry dropout does good.
Yeah.
All right.
That's a long answer to a really short question. Oh, yeah. The thing is like you're always trying to place your work into places where it can add to the conversation. And, by having work shown, I mean, it's becoming increasingly difficult, I think, for documentary work to find places to be shown, particularly in big cities, London, New York, et cetera. You naturally you would think that there would be a huge inventory of places where you can show that kind of work, but in reality, those opportunities there in a lot of places are really limited. So you have to be really creative.
I think it was in Bangkok. Yeah. You had an interesting pop-up exhibit.
Yeah, I mean, we had a pop-up exhibition at an old abandoned bank in downtown Bangkok. That was probably one of the most successful exhibitions of the Rohingya work that I've ever had. But besides that, you're always trying to get work into important places where important people can be exposed to it. Where whether it makes a difference or directly leads to change is in question, but at least it's getting in front of the eyes of important people. So the Rohingya work has been shown in the European Parliament building in Brussels. And just in February of this year, an exhibition was held in the Russell Senate Rotunda on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., as conversations are happening right now about a Burma bill that's going through the bureaucratic processes.
And who put that up? Who made that happen?
That exhibition was made possible through the funding of American Jewish World Service. A lot of the images on that exhibition were images that I created in September during this most recent exodus of Rohingya out of Burma. That trip was funded by the Center for the Prevention of Genocide at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum.
And they had a contact with whoever
curates
that Senate
and so
Rotunda.
For me, it's like, I think, okay, well, as a photographer, I can create the work and I can come up with ideas for the platform that can then be used by people. But I need to collaborate with people who can take it much further than that. And both those organizations had connections with people at the Foreign Senate Relations Committee who could then open up the door for presenting a proposal to the exhibitions team at the Capitol Hill and get it approved and everything.
That's pretty important.
Yeah.
That's pretty important.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. I mean, collaboration is a big part of it.
Obviously. So. Yeah. Great. How important is it to collaborate with a fixer, a translator, a guide, somebody who knows the community, and how do you find that right person?
Well, I mean, I think it's essential. Yeah. I mean, I would say I don't. I'd never really say fixer.
Yeah, that's a
journalistic
term. Yeah, I guess more.
But I mean, I guess it's guide. I mean, really, and usually it's a translator who knows people. And who people the community knows, who can act as your fast track into situations because people trust them, and because they trust them,
You can't do what you're trying to do without
absolutely
somebody
not.
like that.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not. It would be impossible.
And just asking around,
Yeah,
finding the right person.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I think going back to what your question was, how do you gain that level of trust? Where a lot of that level of trust comes from association with a person who they already trust. If this guy who from their community has kind of vetted me and said, okay, yeah, we'll let you in, then and then when people meet me, then I think that it takes it to a whole another level.
So I guess it's the stateless project that then led you to the Rohingya project. Is that
Yeah,
true?
I mean, I think anybody who's doing work on the issue of statelessness anywhere, particularly in Asia, I mean, it's really not legitimate unless you include what's happening with the Rohingya. And I made my first trip to Bangladesh March of 2006, and this was a story that was just nowhere even near the news cycle.
We were talking about that today.
But-
I mean, for us, it's
Yeah.
a year we've been hearing this
Yeah.
story. You've been on it for 10 years.
And
so-
I was just I'd never seen a community or a group of people just disenfranchised, degraded to such a low level, just living bare existence, that I was just so shocked. And I knew how complicated the story was. And so one, 2.5, 3 week trip was just nowhere near enough to be able to do what I wanted to do. So I just kept going back. And being based in Bangkok, it was
Mostly
just
on your own dime? at
all,
this point?
all on my own dime.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done 14 trips now to Burma and Bangladesh just for the Rohingya story, and I think all of them, for the except of 2, were on my own dime. And that's fine. And I want it that way, And each trip, you peel away another layer. You get deeper into the story. People get to know you.
And if you keep coming back on your dime, you're serious. You
Well,
don't have
sure.
And
any.
people
You're
recognize-
on their agenda.
I mean,
Yeah.
you just get really invested in the importance of why you're there and what you're doing. And the story. I'd go on these trips to Bangladesh, and the work would get published again in the New York Times, but it would be me pitching it to them, and that was great. Or it'd get published in other magazines. But
when did the images from this story first find some international publications?
it would have been, I think, 2009
Okay.
is when the Times ran another big
And at
spread.
that point, you were working for years on this project.
Yeah,
So you-
I'd already been 3 years into
Yeah.
the Rohingya thing. And the thing is with the Rohingya is that they burst into the news cycle and then they evaporate just as fast. And I mean, it now happened from 2006 until about 2012. That's exactly what happened. It burst in the news, something would happen, and then everybody would cover it, or not everybody, but they'd get into the news cycle and then they'd just disappear.
Actually, let me jump onto that too. What's the reception that you get, or your work gets, and the publication that you get here compared to other places, Europe, Asia? Is there any difference? Is there any reaction that's different? Is there any appreciation?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I think that if I look at the work of mine that's been published, the majority of it has been published outside of the U.S.
That's what it seemed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, occasionally something will appear. When I mean Times, I mean more Herald Tribune. Or now international.
And do you
New York
do you
Times.
work with an agency now?
No.
Or nothing? Okay.
No.
So it's all just the contacts you've made and the editors you know?
Yeah, editors I know, editors you meet, you find, you created a relationship with an editor of a magazine that opens up doors to continue to keep going back to them. I mean, kind of the whole thing. But to be honest with you, I also found that it's always, I think, exciting to see your work in print somewhere.
Sure.
Always. But at the same time, I think that working on these kind of stories, that exposure is so short-lived, I mean, it runs for a day in a paper.
It's probably true more so now.
Completely.
First of all, world events and national events, I mean, it's blinding. We all checked our phone before we sat down here. We're going to immediately check to find out if the world still exists afterwards.
Yeah.
But I imagine one of the downsides of the internet, aside from the fact that it gives you an opportunity to get so much out so much easier, you also vanish quicker because there's such a flood of information that's being hit.
I mean, you've opened up, I think, this whole terrain that I think is just so vital for people to be discussing nowadays. And I've approached it. Maybe I started looking at things differently about 6 or 7 years ago. And even though work was getting published, the fact is I constantly felt like the story demanded more, that the people in the pictures, it deserved more than just getting published for a day or two or a week.
Looking at your sites and even the way you present the work, it's different than and we look at a lot of journalists, a lot of photographers' websites and their work, wherever we can find it. Yours is presented, at least these stories, in their own sites. It's not about, Greg Constantine and then what he's working on as much as these are the stories. They're chaptered, they're longer.
That's a good
When
point.
I first looked at it, I'm like, is this guy an activist? Is he a documentarian? Is he a journalist? What's going on? And that's to your credit, you know what I mean? So there is that element does come through in the way you present your work.
Well, I mean, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
I really do. I mean, it means a lot. And I think that, you creating the pictures and putting the stories together and the projects together are one thing, but then, you have to remember there's a whole other part of the process of photography, and that's introducing it for people to see.
Sure. You gotta see it.
And that's probably the most important part of the process, at least for this kind of stories and projects that I'm working on. So for me, it was like, the work was getting published, but it was like, I've got to take it further. And that's when I really dove into exhibitions that could be any form, guerrilla style, gallery, museum. It didn't matter what it was, as long as I could get the pictures up on walls. And I remember reading, it was funny. I went back home to Indiana. This would have been years and years ago. Went back home to Indiana and went to this small town, and there was this bookstore. And I walked in, and they had a wicker basket on the floor that was filled with old issues of Aperture in it. And I went into this basket, and I pulled out, a couple issues that really caught my attention. I mean, there was one with, I think there was one that featured Jill's work. There was another that featured Don McCullen's work. I can't remember. And there was another one that featured Susan Meisaus's work. I remember there's an interview with her in this magazine, and she gave this quote that I swear to God, it's like branded itself on my memory ever since. The guy asked her about, what is your, this would have been, I think in the 80s, early 80s when they asked her this question. And it all had to deal with just the challenges of getting your work published. And she said something to, again, I'm paraphrasing it, but she said, what do you do when there's no magazines to publish your work and no pages to be turned? She goes, well, at least there will still be walls.
Yeah.
And I mean, I even talk about it now, and goosebumps, right? Goosebumps come up on my arms because it had such a profound impact on me and the way that I've gone about my work. And all I tell you, it's just, if I can get my work up on walls as many times during a year, that to me is my measure, one of my barometers of being successful in what I'm doing. And I mean, that's why, I mean, like, they'll only be up for one night tonight at CUNY, but this work on the Rohingya, it'll be up at CUNY for one night tonight. That's enough for me. It's going to be engaging like 200-300 people. They'll walk away with a whole different kind of context in their brain about what's happening in the Rohingya community, about statelessness. They'll walk away, doing hopefully everything that I hope photography and the work can do. And that is to challenge people to think about things, to rethink things, to reimagine things, and walk away with a little bit more.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Greg about detention centers, his latest project. Stay tuned.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. Send us a tweet at BHPhotoVideo, #BHPhotoPodcast.
Let's get on to your current project. Obviously, it's something that affects us here in the States directly.
Yeah. I mean, the last 2 years of working on the project, Nowhere People, I did a lot of work in Europe. It was like the one chapter of the Nowhere People project that had not been fully explored. And I was meeting with people, stateless individuals in different countries in Europe, and a lot of them had gone in and out of immigration detention because, for one, they were born stateless, that never possessed documents, never had a birth certificate or a national ID card or a passport. They had made their way from their country that they call home, or had lived in the country that they had always been, they were born in, basically invisible, and, with no legal identity. Authorities would have asked them, stop them on a street, ask them for their papers. They wouldn't be able to provide it. They land in immigration detention. So a lot of people that I met, I thought I'd heard all the stories of stateless people after 10 years of working on that project. But man, the stories of people who had gone in and out of immigration detention just had a huge impact on me. And through no, I guess, intentional way, through their stories, it was like, this is going to be the segue into the next project.
Mm-hmm.
I knew Nowhere People was coming time to a close. The book was going to be published, and I was thinking about what would be that next project. And so then I decided, okay, I'm going to start doing work on the impact of immigration detention on people around the world.
And we're talking about people who aren't necessarily illegal border crossers or immigrants, or the words that we throw around here, but people who may have born in a location without the paperwork. They fall between the cracks, and the systems that have been developed look toward incarceration, at least temporary incarceration, to fix these problems.
And I think that a lot of the people who I've been focusing on with this project fall into that kind of category, but it's also the fact that a lot of people I'm focusing on are people that are coming to different countries,
Sure,
whether it be the United States or Malaysia or the United Kingdom, because I've already done work in both of those countries, seeking safety and sanctuary and seeking asylum. And because of the policies that are put in place in various countries around the world, you're seeing now more and more and more that detention is becoming a central component
And
to
often
immigration.
changing policies. Policies that change one year to the next.
Is becoming a central part of immigration policy. And so the work that I've done in Malaysia, the work that I've done in the UK, and now I've just moved after being away for 13 years from home, I've kind of replaced myself back in North America, and I'm doing work here in the United States for maybe the next year, probably two, just on the project. That'll be the biggest chapter of the whole project.
And so did you complete one version of the project in Asia?
So
and
the
then
Malaysia
Europe?
chapter, the Malaysia chapter is finished. It was just put up online on the sevendoors.org website. And over the next year, other chapters will start to be released. It's in so many ways, it's kind of like Nowhere People, to where you kind of have a germ of an idea and then you just start going with it. And unintentionally, the project just decides its own course organically. And that's what's really exciting to me about these kind of projects. And after, a period of time, you might have, at least image-wise, you might have a lot that just seems so disjointed and little pieces here or there. But then over time, everything starts to take a bit of a shape, a visual shape. And that's
this is a good
what's
lesson.
really exciting.
For our listeners and for photographers everywhere, it's a skill to be able to understand the process or the experience that you have, and then to see where the process will go, and then let the process take you a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you're working on projects like this, and particularly the one that I'm working on now, where immigration issues are just so huge. There's so many different tentacles to them that you can find yourself lost down a rabbit hole, and that takes you away from kind of the original idea. And that's really easy to do. But to be honest with you, it's also something to where the longer the amount of time you're involved in it and the more dedicated you are to it, the more educated you come, the more layers of context that you're building in your head about the understanding of things, the more the project ends up really driving you. And that's a really exciting part of the process for me.
On that note, do you feel differently about the world right now? Do you feel that you are essentially a U.S. and American citizen, or do you feel more of being a citizen of the world, or maybe even feel a citizen of another country or culture right now?
I mean, I think it's a really good question. I mean, I'm a dual U.S. Canadian citizen, but I've lived outside of North America now for like 13 years. I'd come home and visit family for a month or so, or less during the years. because you come home, you want to spend your energy with family and everything, and you kind of, let all the politics of what's happening in the U.S. kind of dissipate out of the way because you just want to have meaningful time with family.
And then the second half of the day,
yeah, but but then at the same time, it's like I mean, I feel like I'm coming back to the U.S. with a bit of fresh eyes because I haven't been here for so long. There's places of the country that had I been living here, I probably never would have gone to, but now the work is driving me to Southern Arizona, to Southern California, to places in the country that I've never been to before that I never probably would have gone to. And if I would have gone to it, I would have gone there more as like a getaway, But now I'm diving in to underneath that kind of face layer. And it's
the name of the place is irrelevant. It's the story that you're after.
Yeah, and it's really eye opening. I mean, I've been on the I've been on the road now for like 35 days straight in Southern California and Southern Arizona, and I flew into New York for this event for 2 days, and I'll go back to Phoenix. And I'm living out of suitcases with my partner, and we're kind of working on this project as a team in a sense, where she's providing me with all this amazing information that I just don't have the time and research to do. But at the same time, it's like I'm seeing an element of the country through the narrow lens of this theme of immigration detention. I think that for me, the issue of detention is just, of at least immigration detention, it's just like statelessness. I'm meeting all of these incredibly inspiring people who have, people can look at them as victims in so many ways of a system, but also at the same time, I mean, in so many ways, a lot of these people are just total heroes in my mind, that for just continuing to be able to brave one day after the next with all these obstacles that have been built up in front of them, being separated from families, being thrown into a place to where they have no control or freedom over their lives, where the system itself challenges them to rethink their own identity from being somebody who's good to being a criminal.
Absolutely.
I mean, all these things. But detention for me it's just not what's confined within those four walls of that menacing physical detention center. It's the psychological impact that lives with people long afterwards. I want the project in so many ways to challenge people to rethink what detention is, from being something that has to deal with the architecture to something that has to do with the human element of it. How does it last how does it travel with people after they've been released? How does it deal? Does it impact a family who has somebody who's in detention?
The children of somebody.
Exactly.
The wife.
Take the conversation beyond that menacing jail-like prison that's a place for people into the more personal.
You photographed a lot of different groups of people in different places. Have you picked up any kind of commonality between them as far as why they're being persecuted and why they're stateless? What's the common thread between them?
For all those, I mean, I think for the whole project, Nowhere People, I traveled to 18 different countries, and there's stateless communities in most of them. And, the legal elements behind why they're stateless is probably serves as the least important or the least common shared. I mean, for me, those years of working on Nowhere People, the fundamental commonality that almost all of those groups shared was that they were stateless as a result of racism, discrimination, and intolerance, to where those things, racism, discrimination, and intolerance, had manifest themselves into the policies that governments had put in place to intentionally arbitrarily deny them of this fundamental right of citizenship. So that was a very common thing, where basically, most of these stateless communities, they've lived in these countries for generations. They know where their home is. The Rohingya, they know where home is. Home is Burma. The Nubians, they know where home is. That's Kenya, and so on and so on. But it's basically the governments, because of discrimination, racism, and intolerance, saying, you don't belong here. And the way that we're going to make you not belong here is by depriving you of this very, very fundamental thing that attaches all of us to a place these days, and that is citizenship. it creates such a central part of all of our the starting ground for all of our identities in terms of who we identify ourselves are: American, Canadian, British, French, Kenyan. I mean, so much of that is our acknowledgement and our recognition of technically belonging to a place.
It was interesting what you had written about regarding the Burmese Citizen Act and how they defined citizenship in this legal document as what is not, as opposed to what is.
Exactly. And the Rohingya community was intentionally left out
excluded
of that list
Right.
of 135 national ethnic races that were recognized as being people who could belong to Burma. They were intentionally denied the inclusion of that. I mean, when people, and this was one of those thematic elements of citizenship and statelessness, citizenship throughout all those years that would just kept driving me, is that here you have this concept of citizenship, which all of us fundamentally associate as something related to inclusion. But this is also something that can be manipulated, manufactured, and exploited in a way by governments to do the very opposite, and that is to exclude people. Right. And not just individuals, but entire ethnic communities that really belong to the larger fabric of societies all over the world. And that was a really amazing part of that project, was seeing those common elements.
And taking it to another level, the legal apparatus here is questionable too, because many of these people have not committed quote unquote crime or have not been tried. They're waiting, and they could be waiting for several years before they get this chance. And
yeah, completely.
Needless to say, that's something that shouldn't sit well with people.
Well, sure. And I also think that this is also a time where, and it's very relevant to the issue of immigration detention, is that this is also a time where the definition of crime is now becoming very blurred. I mean, there's a lot of gray in terms of what is a crime that is determining whether people go into a detention or not. I mean, and that's a whole different conversation. Yeah. But I mean, it's a project that I'm really excited about. These 35 days on the road have been so eye-opening. It's produced a lot of work that I'm really proud of so far. I look forward to the next year or two of just traveling all around the country, working on it.
How the dealing with the authorities when you have your camera and when it's clear you want to be photographing these subjects. Can you speak a little bit about that, and also about the differences that you see from culture to culture when you're trying to push your way through the bureaucracy and the power structures? To get
I mean, there is a pretty clear, rigid bureaucracy here at home. Where getting access to detention centers and stuff is obviously going to be a big, huge challenge. But I also don't think that that's a key component to this particular project. And it's been interesting because you go to places like Burma, or you go to places like Bangladesh or Ivory Coast or Kuwait or whatever it is, where you run it, your relationship with the authorities changes from one country to the next. And my experiences with authorities from one country to the next has been totally different. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Burma. I've been banned and blacklisted from the country, but I haven't had really any negative experiences with the authorities there. They're menacing and they're sinister, and the country is run by a bunch of thugs. But the fact is that when working, I never really had a problem with that. But yet at the same time, I've been banned and deported from the country.
It's a reality. Yeah.
That's because you're working mostly with the people themselves and avoiding the authorities when necessary?
Yes and no. I mean, yes and no. I just think that, the higher structures of the country, of that particular country, they don't want stories to be told. Do you
feel eyes on you when you're out working there? And I'm not talking about just from the people you're photographing.
No, actually, to be honest with you, I mean, I think I think I end up worrying more about the people who I'm photographing and the people who I'm working with than with my own safety.
Okay.
Because the fact is, if I get in trouble, I have an embassy that I can call.
Right.
A lot of people don't have that protection. I mean, you look at what's happening in Burma right now. You've got 2 amazing Reuters journalists who are on trial who can face up to 15 years in jail for telling a piece of Burma that is so important for people to know about, but the authorities have clamped down on them.
And I want to jump back to the work in Malaysia. Which is the group of people that are generally finding themselves?
So the work that I did for the Seven Doors Project in Malaysia, it's looking at all different types of ethnic communities from Burma who have fled Burma to Malaysia to seek asylum, but yet are not recognized and are, to be honest with you, they're being rounded up all the time. I mean, immigration authorities are very active there. People end up finding themselves in detention for years on end. And that it affects people, the level of fear that people have in all those different communities, whether you're from the Mon, the Chin, the Kachin, the Rakhine community in Malaysia. The level of fear is huge. People don't want to leave their houses because they're afraid of getting stopped on the sidewalk.
And we're hearing that here too.
Yeah, and this is what's really interesting about the project that I find is that, as you go on, each particular country, and that's why I like doing these kind of global projects, is because each particular country has their own unique characteristics. But then when you place each country on top of each other collectively, you find these common themes that are shared between all of them. You see how detention is becoming a much more aggressive part of immigration policy, not only here in the U.S., but in Malaysia or in the U.K. And that's why I really love doing these, because it allows people to compare and contrast different situations around the world and see how countries are influencing each other, how the policies are being shaped by other countries and what their decisions are.
Have you seen, and again, big question here, but have you seen a culture or a country that, in your opinion, is handling the situation in a more humane or in a more organized manner?
Right now, no. And it's not because there aren't. It's just because I haven't, I'm not far enough in the project to kind of have been exposed myself to that. I hope I end up seeing that at some point in time.
And how far along are you? You're just starting the U.S. aspect of it. Is that more or less?
Yeah, starting the U.S. aspect. I kind of started that towards last fall. And I started the whole Seven Doors project the beginning of last year. So I'm about a year and a half into the project.
And I saw some work you'd put on Instagram, which gets us back to the question earlier, or the comments earlier about, the best ways to show off this work.
Yeah.
I mean, Instagram does have its advantages. And I saw some of the, you were waiting for a woman to be released from a detention center with her family, friends, and supporters the other day.
Yeah.
And, I'm now aware of that situation, and I wasn't otherwise. So,
I can tell you, I really appreciate you saying that, because I've never really held too much currency in social media. I've never really given it that much. I don't know. I've never really given it that much. And for you to say that means a lot. I mean, I've got like 1,200 Instagram followers, and I've never been a person who wants to fill my followers list with tens of thousands or 100,000s. I've never aggressively done that. And when you put out when you see people that have 250,000 followers or whatever, and they put out an amazing picture, you really realize that really 1% or even less than 1% of the people who are their followers react to it in a way. And just to hear you say that with the minuscule number of people that I have, and that it has made a difference, well, maybe that fills me a little bit of optimism with it, But I'll still turn to walls always.
By the way, John is a bot. I just want you to know that. Hate to pop the bubble,
hilarious.
but I didn't want you to walk out of disillusion.
Sure. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what you foresee with the U.S. aspect of this project, some of the concerns going forward, some of the hopes, some of the problems.
That's a great question. I mean, I think right now I'm coming into it with very little pretense. I just want to see where this thing takes me over the next year or two.
Another question to follow up and throw this in there is, now you're in your home country, or one of your home countries, and where you grew up, and that's going to have a whole other effect on you.
Oh, sure. I mean, really. And that's a good thing. I mean, I want to see things in this country that make me feel hopeful or outrage me, or make me want to challenge what's happening, I mean, I really want that. And I'm excited about that. And this project and photography is something that is helping me through that kind of process. It helps me understand, the country in a whole different way than I did before. Places where I grew up, people who I know where they grew up. I mean, I think that is such an important part of.
And it's not just Arizona and the border.
Absolutely
areas.
not. I mean, I'm looking forward to going to again, places where I've never really spent much time. I'm looking forward to going to Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama. I'm looking forward to spending time in Philadelphia, which has probably the highest rate of ICE arrests in the U.S. You know, I'm really looking forward to. I'm looking forward to spending time in Chicago. All these places, I think, are going to end up contributing to me having a much better understanding of this country that is the country that I was born in, but I have been away from for so long, and actually been away from at such a defining point in the time of the U.S. I missed 9/11. I wasn't here for then. I moved away from New York. I think it would have been like in February of the end of 2000. I moved away, but I'd been here since '93. And I missed the recession. I missed the housing burst. I missed a lot of.
You didn't miss anything.
No. I mean, I wasn't here. I had. I'd come home. I talk with family and friends and see the stress and everything on their mind. I missed the. You know, I wasn't here for Obama's election. I wasn't here for Trump's election. Right. So in that sense, I'm really excited to be back.
And do you think that being here will change the photo process side of it in terms of, well, let's say even from film to digital, from who you're going to look to for outlets, for the networks you're going to build? Do you plan on that? Do you even have a time frame on how long this is going to be, or it's open ended? I
don't really have a time frame, but I'm really excited about where I can see this work go. I mean, I think having lived in Asia, you have a bit of freedom and flexibility with things. You know, you can put stuff in places that you don't need permits for and everything. I'm really excited about where things might take me here in the U.S. in terms of how far I can take that work, because I think that's a big part of who I am and what I do as a photographer. It's like, you know, where can I see this work get? That's a big motivating factor for me in driving me forward with every month or each new story or each new trip. You know, how can I get these pictures? Where can I get them?
Do you hope to, or do you expect that you'll find one or two subjects people or stories that you'll continue with throughout the whole time?
I hope so. I mean, I've met over the past 35 days, I've met some really incredible people who I really do plan to stay in touch with, you know, follow their stories over the next year or two, hopefully. And there's a lot of really amazing, intrepid people working on the ground here in the U.S., from individual activists, academics, to small little organizations that have absolutely no funding whatsoever, and you wonder how are they doing this?
And even law enforcement, you know, who is doing their thing.
Sure, and for me, it's like, you know, this is a great time for me to be able to see who can I collaborate with to make sure that this language is included in whatever they're trying to do to make a difference, you know?
On that note, I'm thinking, I'm listening to you talk, I'm listening to this past hour or so of conversation, and I have no doubt that there will be people listening to this episode and who have passions similar to yours, okay? And they have these energies, and they say, you know, this sounds like something I'd want to do. I don't have the time, the money. I can't just drop what I'm doing, pick up, fly off to the other side of the universe or anything like that.
But you
However,
do it.
I think it's important to note that if you are really thinking in those terms, all right, open up a local newspaper, talk to neighbors, go to your local bulletin board online. Find out what's going on, because I have little doubt that down the street from you, in the town that you live in, there is something going on that you could possibly make a difference for, to make a few phone calls, to go speak to some people. There are large problems in the world, and there are smaller problems that are local. And maybe that's a good place to start off with.
Yeah, completely. And I also think that, you know, to kind of add on to what you just said, I think that there's a lot of really big problems in small local places too, you know?
Yes.
And for people who live in a small place, that problem might be just as big to them as as something that's on a more national level, you know?
They're all pieces of the puzzle.
Completely. And I think that curiosity really, you know, can take people a long way. And I am an optimistic heart, and I believe that if you want to do something, there are ways of making it happen. And if you're a photographer who's just starting out in the business and wanting to do something, I mean, the fact is that this is a time where the business is just, it seems like it's just a complete mess. But there are ways of doing things that are outside of the traditional. And when you recognize that, it's quite liberating to think, you know what, I don't have to feel like I can do a photo project by having to be on assignment for somebody.
Work within the parameters of your own reality.
I can do things. There's grants out there. There's funding out there to find. You just got to spend the time to do it. And once you do find it, I think it's an amazing process to realize, oh man, you know, I can do this work without having to fit into that, you know, compartment of the business. And also at the same time at a different scale. You can walk away, because this type of work, you know, the fact is that it impacts you as a photographer, as a human being, as you're doing this work. It's not that you're just doing it because it's your job.
And what you're going to bring from your experience over there to here is going to be incredible.
These kind of stories, they shape you as a human being too. And that's a really important thing for people to understand and keep in mind as you're working, as you're a young photographer or whatever, that, you know, these are your decision to move forward with these kind of stories, whether it be a small thing locally or something nationally or something globally. I mean, you're putting yourself out there to let things reshape who you are. You know, it's a very personal thing too, and that is really exciting.
That's a good place to end.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you a question though. Can you explain a bit what Seven Doors for the title of the project? Where it came
That's
from,
a great
what it means?
question.
Yeah.
I'm happy that you asked it. I started the project with no title. I didn't know what the title was going to be, and I met a guy in the UK. This would have been last spring, and we were talking in a park, and he was sharing his story with me. And he had been in immigration detention in the UK for 3 years. Stateless guy, and he was talking about his experience, and I was telling him a little bit more about the project. And after a couple of hours of talking, towards the very end of it, he said, you know, when they put me into detention, I remember only having to walk through one door into the detention center, and I was in there for 3 years. And it was an experience that I'll live with for the rest of my life. And he goes, and the day that I was released, he goes, I remember the authorities in the detention center walking me through 7 different doors from my cell until the door where they said, there you go, you're free. And then he turned to me and he said, you know, how can I be free? I'm not free. This experience I'm going to live feeling like I'm in detention for years to come because of this experience. And for me, him saying that was like this gift. It was a gift of him saying, I know what the kind of project is that you're working on, and that's why I've titled the project Seven Doors.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
All right.
Greg,
come back and tell us. Come back and talk to us.
I have a feeling we're going to have you back here because there's so much to talk about. Greg, if people want to see more of your work, where should they go? What online outlets do you have?
I would say that you can go to, for the new project, go to 7doors.org. That's the number 7doors.org. For the larger project, the 12-year project on statelessness, you can go to nowherepeople.org, or specifically tying it into the reason why I'm here in New York right now, which is all about the Rohingya, which I'll be going back to Southeast Asia next month to do more work. That's exiledtonowhere.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Instagram.
And
Instagram.
and
which
Instagram. That is GR Constantine.
And there you have it.
It's been great being here. Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure having you. Pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. If you're not a subscriber to our show, I will not shame you because I'm not that kind of guy. I do, however, urge you to put the shame behind you by heading on over to iTunes, Overcast, Player FM, SoundCloud, or YouTube and sign up for instant access to all of our upcoming shows, along with access to over 100 past episodes. And for now, on behalf of John Harris, Jason Tables, and myself, thank you so much for tuning in today.